realized that I was supposed to go on right at the start. So doing the opening is one thing, and making the presentation is another in my world. So I just stopped. Okay. I heard a lot of things that I can relate to. So actually, I'm kind of glad that I'm on last. So and I'm writing it on my hand. I'm writing it on my note envelope here. I heard in your presentation about the two-row wampum. I brought for a visual effect, back at the tables there, a variety of wampum belts that are part of the Anishinaabe, the various belts, and that I am advocating that there's not just one way of relating the history. It's not the documents. You know, we all talk about the treaties, but there was another way of making the agreements about the use of the land. And those in the indigenous population, they made those agreements in belts. And the big belt that's laying on the table there is the Niagara Treaty, which is the 1763 proclamation, when it defined how the land was to be taken from the indigenous people. And that in the subsequent belt, the following year, was the government representative of the day who came back, gathered the First Nations or the Native people together at Niagara, and said, here's what we said in that written paper, and here's how you understand the belt, and how we're going to live together. And so, to me, that whole agreement side of things has been left out of the picture here, and everything, and that the belts are a different way of telling that story. And unless we get out of the whole process of the First Nations people of this land are novelties to be looked at, enjoyed, you know, dealt with when they need to, we're never going to make it. So I have, in all of the work that I've done to create an awareness about the Native people, specifically the Mississaugas of the New Canada First Nation that I'm a member of, that there are a lot of work to be done. And the couple things, you mentioned Grey Hill, or the Native the Woodland Culture Center. My mother was in that center, and so I'm a survivor of a descendant of a survivor of that center, and definitely had an impact on her. Died at 56 after having 11 children. So when we talk about how can a landscape tell our story, and that I feel that we've been covered, and I'll say this in my presentation, that how do we bring that back? So I work with a lot of different people, landscape architects and things like that, about bringing our story, our designs back into play. And there's one presentation that was done by a student, and I'll set this up for people to look at. And he talks about how we can recover the Mississaugas at the Credit River. And so that, see that your picture there? That's the Mississaugas of the Mississauga Golf and Country Club. That's our village under there. That's what's underneath the bed. And if you drive down here from, you drive on the QEW, the Mississauga, get to Mississauga and the Credit River, which is named after us, that when they were building the QEW, it moved 3 times. It run right through the middle of this site here. And that before there was rules about artifacts and things like that, they moved it from this site to closer to where it is today, and then in the 60s to where it is right now, that we all drive on, that I drove into as well. And every time I come over that bridge, I say hello to the ancestors. In that this place, this is where our village was for a period of time, and our people lived there and used that land and went to school, went to church. You know, we had been converted into Christianity. Our bones, our grave sites were dug up and just they're just part of the landscape there. And when the archaeologist said, we went there because they discovered bones and burial goods, as they call it, and he said, I can't dig anywhere without digging up your bones. So remember that. Any of these waterways where our people have been and lived, we're probably part of the landscape. It's just not known. So I tell them, say hello to the ancestors and tell them we're sorry that happened, and we'll hope that it won't keep happening. So that's the kind of work that I'm working on here. The one of the things the provincial policy statement that I, as an employee of the Mississaugas and Credit First Nation, I worked diligently on changing the wording there. Previous wording had no wording in it to acknowledge us or even talk about protection and how to address this. So it was a lot of work and a lot of meetings from Windsor to Kingston to go sit there in those rooms and say, you need to think about us. We were here too. We were here before settlement came, and the Fort York has taken up my cause where I say, we were there and we're still here. And I go, touch this. I'm still here. And that, so that takes a lot on the architects, the designers, about how do we incorporate that. And I don't think anybody really quite gets it yet. A lot of little stuff is happening. A lot of little stuff and big stuff is happening. And some of the big projects were always part of it. But you know, the tourism book says, oh, the Mississaugas lived here for thousands of years. And then we came and made it better. So I say the tourism guidebook has to change. You write us off in the first paragraph. It says, calls us early people, ancient, historic, like we get all these labels and act like we're not here. And that, just to, before I jump into it, that we're looking at how to, when there are spaces that are of value to us. And and why is it? It's not just the built history. In some cases, I don't know why we think that's beautiful. So the when we all, as I said in this room, maybe 4 years ago, we all need a tree to hug. And if we don't have that in our lives, that nature, that beauty, that feeling, then I said, if you think we got a mental health problem today, you just wait. If we keep building this kind of stuff without creating less and less and less green space and less natural space and making it part of what we have to do today in this age. So I say that it's all about those, we heard the speech at the awards about sensory. It's that feeling. I don't know whether you get a feeling or not, but I do when at certain places. I was at Fort Henry there in September, and that they're doing a huge cut, doing infrastructure, maybe new water line. And they said, and my sister said, what is that? I said, it looks like it's a new water line or new sewage line running right into the lake. And so it's about 100 feet, almost a block, this huge cut. And I said, I don't know exactly what it is, but I got a feeling that there is something here. And it looks like they're not addressing it. So it's a feeling. And how do we bring those into our designs? I think it's an experience. We should be able to experience what that was. And our stuff is definitely left out. So just a quick story. Ali Ma, who's a student out of Toronto, he's actually an older student, come from Bangladesh, an architect, and he came here to Canada, couldn't work here, went to UMT for his heritage landscape, and he did his story on his landscape thing, got designated, so he's a person. So I'm using his designs to say, how can that show us? And so he was invited to this presentation at U of T for the Architectural International Group, Sacred Places, Sacred Spaces. And he said, we did our presentation, and I went and stood with him. He said, Carolyn, they're probably going to ask questions that I can't answer. So, and sure enough, the question came up from an architect from Europe, my understanding, and he said, Well, I get from your presentation, the Native people, that you just want to get something back. So I'm not from North America. And he said that twice, so I'm thinking he says, I don't have the North American hang on. He said, if you engage me to come and build a building for you, he said, and I put your design on that building out there, are you going to be happy? Is that all you want? And so Wally goes, you got to answer that one. So, and I said, this is the question, because I'm pushing for us to be seen on this landscape, something about us. And I said, well, I don't know really if I can answer that question fully, but I'll tell you that when I think about all the stuff, when I say stuff, I mean everything in our lives, that our people have lost, it is overwhelming. So I said, if I look out there and on that building, it's got a design that I can relate to. A moccasin, a dream catcher, a flowing stream, fish in the water, I'll be happy for that moment. And that's just the start of how can we bring us back into here. Because I drove down here, I didn't see me on any of these lands, on any of these buildings. Nobody puts us anywhere. And it's all just about the built history. And after people came and made it better. So we've been left out of that side of things. So get to Moccasin identifier. I'm the advocate, and I got a little dog and pony show that I go all over the place and say, this is what we need to do. I just want to show you this picture. These are real moccasins at the Bata Shoe Museum, and we have taken the project that we're talking about and the moccasin identifier. These are people's real shoes that were that we made drawings of, and then we made a stencil. And so, and they allowed us, they allowed us full access. So they're curated, research curated, and we're working on taking that to. If we as First Nations people do not get a marker on the ground today, we will be lost forever. How will they ever know about us? How will they recognize whose land they're on? How will they know us as we live today? Sites that are significant to us are Indian reserves that, as we live and know today. I live on the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. Set aside for the sole use and benefit of its members. Ancestral villages, where we once lived, like you saw the Credit River here. But before we moved over there in the 1820s or something like that, we were here for thousands of years. We have band members whose great-grandparents were born on the Toronto Island. Our village sites are all over the place here. They're just covered up. And before that, we migrated from the north, Mississauga 8, all the way into, all along the lakes, all around Lake Simcoe, down here into Toronto. And as the Mississaugas of the Credit, I'm part of the part that came to Toronto. The other part went to up by Belleville area. Our burial grounds, our ancestral sites, areas, sacred sites, gatherings, spiritual places, medicine sites. There's lots of our sites along the waterways and rivers and underneath buildings here. Trails, summer, winter camps, hunting, fishing, gathering, harvesting sites. As the Anishinaabe people, that's what we did. We moved around. We moved from place to place and used the land and then moved on and then come back. But almost always along the waterways. So the idea is to promote a type of marker or plaque placed on sites that have been plowed up, dug up, paved over, built over. We use research, archaeology reports, things like that, that have been produced by the archaeology evidence that there's something there. But for the Mississaugas or the Anishinaabe, because we lived lightly on the land, we're almost like not, it's used against us now. Okay, if you didn't drop a whole bunch of crop here and you know, you find it and patent it up, we'll be, okay. And that, we're almost done. So now that's used against us because we just walk through the land. So, back up. So we're doing that. We come up with the idea of a moccasin as a symbol to recognize our existence and identity. It shows the move we talked about. This is our traditional territory. And this was defined way back before settlement. We just put it on a map. We've linked up with Friends of Toronto, the Batachute, and we've come up with these designs. This is an Anishinaabe moccasin. It's got a lot of decoration, natural features on it. This is a Huron that has, that's all natural stuff, moose hair, quilt. Back in the 1700s. I mean, we could do stuff. We know how to do things. We can make beautiful design, but where's our design? We've asked people to get a better name than Moccasin identifier, but I think it's going to stick. Add additional sites that can be put to our protection list. Give input on stories, write lesson plans for your area as significant sites. You can all help. The idea is to take a moccasin, put it into a stencil, have every school in this province in June 21st next year research whose land they're on, take this stencil and stencil it onto the ground in, I call it school paint, and it'll come off. And they'll do it again next year. And the idea, I said, I have a dream too, that Ontario will be covered in moccasin identifiers in the next decade, and that they will all know whose land they live on. Thank you.